session to hear from all of you about your thoughts about reopening, and Dr. Sal will talk more about that. Happy July 1st. It's going to be a beautiful day and a beautiful weekend to celebrate the holiday. So if everyone would please mute themselves, that would be wonderful, and that will stop any of the background noise. So our protocol this morning will be after Dr. Sal's introduction to what we are doing and what we'd like to get out of this session. We will then break you into groups. You will be in groups for about 20 minutes, answering one key question. We will be asking you to assign a person to be the recorder for your group on the Google sheet that I've shared with everyone and that you can manipulate and use. And then also to assign a reporter to your group. So when we come back to the larger group, you can give us your top 3 ideas for reopening schools. So again, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sal.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We have 233 participants. We also have board members on board, and I thank you for being here, board members. We know no one more important than you to get information from regarding the opening. I'm sure you've read the guidelines, although it's 2 months away. The guidelines are specific about creating a plan which engages all students on a returning to school model. It also calls for what we call a hybrid in case they need to go to another phase of the return, which would be a hybrid of less students than the normal, all returning to school. And then the third model, they call it enhanced DL. So in order for us to even to think about and approach this, we need to know your thinking. You know, whether we agree or not with this, safety, your safety, student safety is the highest priority for all of us. So as we develop these plans, that will be our central focus. I do intend on writing the commissioner and the governor, allowing us a little more flexibility, and we'll see what develops from that. However, the plan will have to take place, does have to be submitted by the 24th of July. And hearing what you have to say relative to how the day would go. There are things of, how do we do lunch and how do we do specials? If you read the governor's comments or even the guidance, they call for 6 feet apart, but only if possible. We have to define that and still create a safety net. I've engaged an architect to work with us who is laying out safety plans throughout the district for spacing. Utilization of cafeterias have been recommended and other such venues. But in fact, we believe if we have to move furniture out and about, the only places we have to move furniture out and about where it's not a fire hazard, such as hallways, would be into some of these largest venues. So a lot of guidance put out to us, but without clear ways, explicit ways of doing it. But hearing from you is a priority for us today. And we will start with that. I'm not sure, I know we have cabinet members on board as well. So, and with that, we'll go to the next phase.
Great. So Kara, if you can go to our question, let's go to the breakout protocol first. The Google document is open to anyone. Please put your ideas in it. And that document I'm going to leave open after the meeting so people can fill in other ideas over the next couple of days that might come to you, or that if you're listening to other school districts and what they're doing and have some good thoughts, that would be great to add it to it. In your group, you're going to choose one person to be that recorder, and you'll be in your groups for 20 minutes, about at the 17-minute mark. If you can decide in your group the top 3 priorities to discuss when we come back into the larger group, that would be wonderful.
Hey, Anne, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just think there's a little bit of confusion of where the Google Doc is.
Okay, so the Google Doc right now is in the beginning part of the chat. So if you go to the top of the chat box in my opening remarks, you can access it there. Thank you, Kara. Great question.
And can you repost the link? Because for those of us who came in late, we cannot see it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, as Ann's doing that, aside from this, there are some surveys that we've taken, and we've also had time with parents that will go into our thinking. We have to conduct another survey regarding its choice on behalf of some parents in terms of choosing certain venues. But as you think about this, and I should have mentioned it, the social emotional well-being of our youngsters is a very high priority. So that needs to play into also our thinking as well, please. Okay, Ann, are we ready to start?
We are. Kara, if you can move to the next slide. So our question today is very similar to what the thought exchange was that was sent out last night. So please partake in that. Venue 2. But we want you to think about what are the top priorities. I'm sorry, there's a spelling mistake in that. That the district should consider when planning a safe and effective school reopening. And so at this point, Kara's going to break everyone into groups. You'll go into your group for 20 minutes at that 17-minute mark. If you would please assign a recorder and come up with your 3 top priorities. You will be returned to the larger group and you'll be able to report out.
Okay, you ready then? We'll
Yep.
separate out. Okay.
Go ahead. That would be wonderful. So, reporter from Kara, first off, how many groups did we land up with? You're muted, I think.
We had 12 groups.
12 groups. Okay. So, if we could have group number 1.
Does group number 1 know the group number 1?
Yeah, I don't think we knew
Yeah.
our group number.
Room number 1. Okay, let's go to group number 2. Room number 2.
Okay, that's us. So our 3 top concerns were the sanitation and minimizing contamination throughout the building. How are we going to do that? What does that look like within individual classrooms, the kindergarten classrooms, at elementary level, looking at all the specials and how they share everything, moving up to middle and high school? How are we going to consistently keep that clean, even though we're sharing all of these products and ideas? The next one is teacher feedback is really, really valuable at this point. And what does that look like? Are we going to have more surveys? How are we going to get that feedback? And also even breaking it down. This is wonderful because it's a whole group, entire district, but even breaking it down into elementary school level, middle school level, high school level, so by schools, and then even by buildings. So making sure we have all of those taken care of for feedback ideas. And then the third thing that was really important, well, there's 2. One was the masks, which goes back to contamination. How are the kids going to be wearing the masks, especially when it's hot and there's no air conditioning in many buildings? Are we going to be able to handle that? So that was another one of them. Lunches was also a big deal, but that's 4, sorry.
Nope, that's fine. Thank you, Christy, for reporting out on that. Group number 3.
Room 1 is also here whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to room 1.
In room 1, like our major ones, we're planning for online learning and for traditional classroom learning, and that would be particularly challenging at all the levels because we gave parents the option to either come back or to stay on the distance learning model. And one of our thoughts there was that maybe we could have teachers separated, as some teachers will do the online distance learning if they are uncomfortable coming back or unable to come back. And then teachers who were comfortable in the classroom could do only the traditional classroom planning, teaching, all of that stuff. Another one of our concerns was cleaning the classrooms in between classes at the middle school and high school levels. A suggestion that we had was that kids can carry a small pouch of disinfectant wipes, and kids can wipe down the chairs and the desks when they leave each classroom, since they will be moving more than the students would at the elementary level. And then another one of our big concerns was the way staff is split between buildings, particularly like OT, PT, speech, that sort of thing, and the way that students would either be able to go to specials, or our students who receive resource services, how they would be able to still get those services and be able to participate in specials while we're trying to keep the cohorts together, because then it immediately opens up to another set of people exposed to that classroom or exposed to those students.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. We'll go to group number 3 now. Group 3 or room 3?
I'm not sure we picked a person, but
Okay.
I can be the person.
Go ahead, Amanda.
For it. Okay, so we the first thing that we talked about was, as has been said, cleaning, sanitizing, bathrooms, filters like for AC units. Who is doing what? And are we going to be told exactly what's cleaned? With the bathrooms, how do we know how many kids are in there at one time? Like, do we have to be careful about that? Social distancing. Our number 2 was professional development for all models of instructions, and also with the professional development, like training on new procedures. Somebody in our group brought up the fact that servers at restaurants had to get trained for how to deal with the virus and to serve people correctly. Are we going to have something like that? And I think the biggest concern that we all have is social distancing at all levels. How in the classrooms do you keep kids 6 feet apart? We talked a lot about the fact that not everybody has desks. People have tables. How do you work with that? We also had other things, but those are our top 3. And if I missed anything from group 3, please chime in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Room 4, please. You're muted. Room 4, do we have someone from that group? All right, we'll move on to room 5.
That's us, Ann.
Great. Go ahead. Do you want to do us?
I think Donna was going to.
Okay, Donna.
Donna there?
And you wrote it all down, though. Can you read it?
Okay, let me pull it up.
Go for
Okay.
it.
So we came up with many different concerns and ideas and thoughts, but it came down to 4 real specific ones. One is the physical health of both the students and the staff, and how that will be protected. We also talked about the social emotional learning. We have many people that have gone through trauma, have not been able to bring closure to things. And so how will those things be accounted for and embedded in the learning so that students can learn? And then lastly is that whole logistic, the space, the funding, the rollout, what training will be done, how are the buildings going to be cleaned, documented, so that staff feel confident in coming back. We did talk a little bit about working with legislators and getting them on board, and how our plan, Danbury's plan, as well as some of the larger districts, needs to be customized to our particular needs, and not necessarily what might work well in a district that only has a fewer students. Great. All right, and room 6.
Hi. Oh, in room 6, again, as I looked through everyone's comments listening, we felt had a lot of the same concerns. One of the things that came up right away always was the health and safety of teachers. There's, I've listened to Governor Lamont at length. I've read his document, and really we're talking about this not being a children's disease, and that the one thing we're not talking about is that it still is an adult disease. And what's happening to the teachers that are high risk, what is their options? Again, teachers that are going home to families that are high risk, they themselves are high risk. So you have to have a comfortable teacher and a comfortable classroom to facilitate good mental health and emotional well-being for the students. Another idea would be, if in talking to the governor, there is sort of some sort of dispensation of, okay, Danbury is sort of an outlier. It isn't a 100-person district. The idea that the high priority students are coming back in first. That could be our Ls, it could be our special ed, it could be our elementary students, the students that really need more hands-on. So if we could stagger, that would seem to be our area to really focus on. And we had talked a lot about masks with the plastic cutouts or plexiglass to be able to put around the youngers and our L students if they really need to be able to see us while we're talking. And so, you know, in a classroom, that might be a solution. I don't know if it overrides the mask wearing, but maybe it could be used, you know, we could take it off so that when the teacher's instructing, they can see the teacher's mouth. And then one other thing we had just talked about was the sick time. I know I'm going on 4, I apologize. But this idea that if we are going out as teachers and we have to be out, is that coming out of our sick time, or are we getting COVID sick days the way business is? Because it's more often than not, we're going to have to be out on multiple times. And therefore now we're worried about subs and subplans.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. And we'll move on to room 7.
So our room 7, similarly that Jen just shared, did talk about like the procedure even around exposure for COVID. So if somebody in your classroom has been exposed, you're expected to quarantine. What would that look like explicitly at the elementary, middle, and high school level, especially with students moving across the school at the high school. In addition, what was a resounding kind of theme coming out is there needs to be a different plan at each level, K-5, 6-8, and 9-12, because there are so many different anomalies for each level. But a great suggestion was having a staggered start. So elementary might start first, K-5, you can work out all the bugs with that, then 6-8, then maybe 9-12. And then the spacing in classrooms is the biggest concern, especially in some of the elementary schools. People are using closets currently as classrooms and spaces with kids. So are we looking into other spaces in the city to accommodate students that are outside our current buildings? And then other things that people brought up around the in-person instruction and how you expect to balance any remote learning, possibly videoing, having students video in during lessons in order to remediate that. Finally, is the parent, if we do have to move to distance learning model or even kind of hybrid, is we need better training for parents, because most students who are not engaged, it was due to a lack of the ability for teachers to communicate with parents, or parents having the knowledge around how to help students remote in and things like that. So using the August time to really train parents up. And if anyone else in my group has more.
Great, thank you, Kara. And we'll move on to room 8, please.
Okay, hello, this is Traci, and we put all our concerns in the document so you folks can see it there if you need to. And some of our top concerns, a couple people I noticed mentioned the staggered start. We mentioned that as well, and I think I saw something on the CDC page about that if anyone's interested in looking into it. But yeah, we talked about space in individual rooms in schools in general, and class sizes, and how we're going to maintain a safe environment with small spaces, some rooms with no windows, and you know, normal class sizes or sometimes larger class sizes. We talked about access to PPE for staff and for students, especially if it's disposable, and how you're going to get it on a regular basis. We talked about monitoring student and family health. The governor's plan doesn't mention anything about, you know, taking temperatures or anything like that. But there was a concern about, you know, if somebody is sick and they're in school. So that's it, group 8. If there anything I missed, please feel free to add in there. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And room 9, we'd like to hear from you now. Room 9?
I'll speak for room 9.
Great.
Our 3 top ones, the main thing that we talked about at the beginning was the sharing of resources and materials at all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. Whether it be crayons and pencils or science lab materials or computers. How would we go about making sure that each student has their own set of materials and resources throughout each day. Another large thing that we talked about was the social emotional learning piece, and also making sure that there are resources available to students and families who have gone through trauma, or maybe students who are coming back to the classroom very anxious. Any of those things, just making sure that there's a focus on the social emotional piece. And then the class size piece and cohorts, we spoke about, possibly the city of Danbury has, I think Kelly mentioned it, talked to the state, possibly starting at phase 2 because of the size of our district. And possibly having a blended model or different start times, something along those lines. So focusing again on the class size and cohorts and making sure that there's a set plan for that to make sure that the health and safety of students and teachers and staff are coming first. I think that is the gist of our top 3, but if I missed any from room 9.
Gena, thank you so much for doing that. I'm Anne. I'm also from room 9 as well, but going with the social piece, I was mostly telling the group, I was like, when it comes to social emotional learning, like us as school counselors or school social workers and school psychologists, are we going to be having like PD on training the staff on that? Are we having people come in? Are we going to be teaching this SEL, whether it's from Ruler or Castle, like curriculums when it's going back to school? So that was just a concern from student services as a school counselor from my perspective on that. Just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Noted that. Wonderful. Thank you. And room 10? Room 10, are you there? Someone there?
Sorry, Ann. I have notes for group 10. Give me a second. So the group and we actually didn't nail down just the 3, but just kind of given what I heard, I will share some of the thoughts that are a little different from what I've heard thus far.
Right.
So 1, support for families, onboarding new families. We talked about the group talked about those concerns, particularly families from ELL. ELL families, also providing distance learning support for those families and social emotional support for those families. Mm-hmm. Another thing that was mentioned was the need for protocols, and mentioned quite a bit in group 10, the need for protocols for student, staff, and families to drive the true implementation of the plan. And so, some of the examples of expectations, what are the expectations around wearing a mask all day? What are the expectations around walking in the hallway? What are the expectations around sharing books and materials? Will there be an expectation that kids are going to bring in their Chromebooks every day that they were given last year? How are teachers supposed to assess students safely? And so, the group talked about the need to, having a big plan is one thing, but having those explicit details that's actually going to drive their day-to-day activities is going to be really important. And then the last one that I captured was, how are we addressing the needs of our staff and students with compromised immune systems? How will we backfill staff who are sick, given our challenges with shortages and subs already? Will we be administering temperature checks? And another big one, will we have an isolation room for identified students and staff who are indeed sick? So kind of 3 big buckets for us.
Great. Thank you for sharing those, Kevin. And we're on to room 11 and then 12.
Yep. So this is Melinda from room 11. Pretty much everything that's been said already is something that came up in our discussion as well. We did sort of break it down to our top 3, which was super difficult, but the safety around everything that everybody has said. the mask wearing, keeping kids together. What about kids who travel? What about kids who come in sick? All of that, the sanitizing concerns and the number of our bathroom spaces and hand washing spaces available to us, including then also the sanitizing and safety of materials, especially the elementary level, shared materials, shared spaces. And then the idea of cohorting, how are you going to logistically and safely best do this? Different concerns, obviously, at elementary, middle, and high school levels. But for elementary kids, if you're talking about keeping, small kids in one spot for an entire day, that could be problematic. Some of the things that other people mentioned that I'm just going to re-mention, the idea of staggered starts. We had a long conversation about that as well. The training piece that several other groups mentioned, we talked about that too, and the need to train both kids and parents. Somebody else also mentioned the laptops. That was a discussion in our group as well. If we're not sharing materials and we're expecting kids to be on their devices, are we now asking 4-year-olds to be traveling back and forth with a laptop every day? And how long do we actually think those are going to last? That's my 2 cents worth. Yeah, and I think that pretty much covers anything else that nobody else said. But thank you.
Melinda, I just wanted to mention one thing that came up that I never thought about. We're talking about cohorting students in school, but on the buses, they're not cohorted.
Right.
So that's going to be a huge issue.
Very true.
Yes,
right.
Brought that up as well, about if you cohort students all day, but then they all get on a bus that is not cohorted. So it was mentioned too. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Traci and Melinda. And lastly, our room 12.
Good morning, Ann. I wasn't able to type in the document, so I just told Kara I would just send it to her privately from our group, but I'll be happy to share. For some reason, I'm not allowed to get on the document.
Okay.
So group 12, we somewhat got down to around 3 issues. So our first one was, returning to school in August at 100%. We're concerned that it's not phased in like everything else should be. And we're, overly concerned that education should not be the test pilot for going back 100%. We're concerned with space issues, as everyone else is, as well as understanding the reality of what teacher instruction will look like under social distancing guidelines, group work, small group instruction, which is really what we need to best support our students' academic needs from what they've missed, and also to kind of catch them up and, apply the rigor to move them forward. Also, the need and cost of individual supplies for each student to have the same materials they need each day to perform at their best. Our second was PPE equipment, monitoring when and when not to wear it, breaks, using masks, the use of them, the option for different types of masks, who will they be provided by and how will they be monitored, the reusable ones, not reusable ones, by staff and students. We also talked about the cleanliness, what is exactly going to be clean and sanitized, also the frequency and who's actually going to monitor that that's happening on a daily basis. And last but not least, we had staff issues overall. What about the comfort level of those returning to work? What are the sick protocols look like? Compromised staff, substitutes, et cetera. And we also talked about school programs. What will they look like? Special areas, SPED, speech, and life skills programs, as well as PD days being virtually or in person. And last but not least, we talked about temperature checks for staff and students.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to ask, does Kevin, so that concludes all of our groups, and all of those suggestions will be taken back and considered by the reopening committee. Kevin or Sal, would you like to do a wrap up?
Yes, thank you, and thank you to everybody. We still have 229 folks on this call. For me, as I listen, all of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you can put them in those categories. The physiological and then the safety needs are the 2 basic needs that we need to provide. I listen to all of us here. I think we all realize that this is not normal; it's abnormal, and we need to learn from when we do return. That's why the phasing in makes a lot of sense if that's provided. I will tell this group we will do the best we can to create those safety situations. but to understand that the communication to us has been clear, that the communicable disease of the pandemic impacts youngsters at a different level than the adults. But for me, I'm concerned about the entire school system, the adults and the students, and the families. So how do we come around that in a sensible, reasonable fashion that will also provide an educational atmosphere so youngsters are learning? I don't have the answers, but certainly today you're going to inform my decisions. I could be mindful of many of these things. I will ask for some variations, but just know that when we do return, we will return with the safest plans that we could put together as best I can, the best as we can. So listening to you today has been really beneficial and much appreciated. So thank you, Ann. And someone did talk about follow-up. We haven't been given a lot of time for this. We've been given to the 24th. Some states actually are going into August. So, we'll be sending out some survey, but certainly as some of you reach out to us, you have some thoughts or some ideas from other places, don't be shy, bring them to us. Maybe it's something we can utilize. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sal. So that concludes this morning's participation. As Dr. Sal said, please continue to send us your thoughts and your ideas because they are important as the decisions are made. And thank you for coming. Go out and enjoy the sun for a little bit, get some of that good vitamin D in, breathe and relax, and we will get through this. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ann.